Welcome to our Gaming Thoughts talk, where we talk about. Well, in this time, we actually played through a bunch of games in the 2021, and we thought we should maybe talk about some of them and give our thoughts about those games. And so, first on the list, we have.
Indivisible.
Yes, it's coming from here. Bam. And bam. Actually, I have no idea how it looks on the camera, but let's just hope it looks good. So,
Yeah.
so I actually backed this game on Kickstarter.
Do you remember what year it was?
Ooh, no.
It probably took quite some years.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it took quite some time before it came out. So it was at least several years ago.
Okay.
And I remember that this was one of those games where I didn't, well, like a lot of times when I buy games, I don't really spend all that much like researching it or anything. I just knew that this was one from the creators who made Skullgirls, the game, and this was because I'm not a huge fan of Skullgirls because I don't really like fighting games that much. But in this game, I just thought that okay, it's going to be like a platformer of some kind, and what it ended up being is this is actually kind of something of an interesting concept. I haven't seen like a game like this before. It's like a half platformer and half like what would you even call it, like turn-based strategy combat
Yeah.
kind of situation.
Yeah, and you choose characters. You have a roster of characters, and you can choose. Was it 3 or 4 into your
4.
party? Yeah. And there's the strategy aspect, which characters you choose and what moves you will be using in the battle itself. And in what order was it also?
Yes, because like if you think about old like JRPG games like Final Fantasy games, and specifically the old ones, in those games, like yeah, it's turn-based. You have like the small like they called it the ATB bar. I don't remember where the ATB comes from. Something like action time, battle timer, something like that. And that sort of tells you which character can go now and so on. But in this game, yeah, every character, I think they had like these small circles. They eventually get like, they had something like every character had 5 or so, and then those characters are sort of like they're mapped to, they're in this like a diamond formation in the same way that these like buttons are in all modern controllers. And if you press like the topmost button, then the topmost character in the formation will do one attack, and if you press that button like X amount of times, then the character will do that many moves. So that was sort of an interesting concept. And the other interesting thing was that there's a similar game that I was playing. This is called the Fallen Legion Rise to Glory. So this game has a similar combat style, but the problem with this game was that or the difference between these two is that of course there's no platforming in this. So that's big difference. But during the combat in Indivisible, when you press one of the buttons and one of your character attacks, it actually pauses the game for the enemy side, so the enemies don't attack at the same time as you. Whereas in Fallen Legion, everybody's doing attacks at the same time, so you may press one of your characters to attack, and then the enemy sort of intercepts that, and it feels really like really unsatisfying. So that's one of the big things what I didn't like about this Fallen Legion. But I really liked the combat system in Indivisible, because when you press an attack, you know that it's your turn to attack right then, and you don't have to worry about the enemies doing stuff at the same time. And it also gives you like the peace of mind to actually think about which of the other characters you are going to tell to attack at the same time, so that they can juggle the enemies and do combos and stuff.
Yeah, it does the very important thing that games should be doing, is that empower the player and not do any cheap tactics that just frustrate the player even too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, you like the combat. It was intuitive.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I remember you very much stuck with the same 4 characters once you got the ones you wanted.
I mean, there's so many characters in this game. Actually, there's because I backed this on Kickstarter. I don't remember how much I paid for it, but enough to get this fancy box. But there's an art book inside, so there's quite a lot of characters in this game. I think something like 30 or 40, and you can only have 4 of them in your party. So it felt like if you put a new guy in there, you had to learn that character all anew. And I think, like, okay, the good... Actually, that reminded me, I think it wasn't just that you could like press the button that that corresponds the character in the screen, but you could also press like a down and that button, and the character does a different move, or up and that button, and the character does a different move. So it felt like there were like a lot of things to learn if you change the party a lot, and there were some characters that I just never really understood. They were, and I don't think that's a bad thing, because there were so many to choose from. So I found my like 4 or 5 favorite characters, and I, for the most part, just stuck with them.
Yes, but it seemed like the game really doesn't challenge you to try out new characters, because I think there are many games, I can think any from the top of my head, that do that kind of stuff, where you have a lot of characters or something other to choose from, and the game gives you some challenges that maybe take some of the characters away for a while, or something that works as an incentive to try out new strategies, or the very weird, hard to control characters that are not just glass cannons that die instantly, but they have some kind of very intricate combo where they are very good at, and you don't get to experience those moments because the game doesn't really challenge you to try out the characters to their fullest.
Yeah, I think there was like every single character that you unlock, I think they had their own like personal quest line, which like I guess that was sort of the only incentive they gave, that okay, you should have this character in your party at this point. But yeah, that was all, and I can sort of understand, because there's so many characters that they couldn't really do any more than that.
And if you can't do something extremely well, then don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good thing they didn't push the incentives even further than that. So you could just enjoy the game as you want to enjoy it. With the characters you want to use.
Yeah, and so a bit back to the subject of like what's the genre for this game. So I guess like if you go in and you don't really understand that it's like a half platformer and half like a strategy RPG, or well, action RPG, I guess is more like it. So if you don't, well, I think there were, because there's a lot of like platforming sections, and you learn a lot of skills that basically make the platforming a lot of fun and make it easier and so on. So I guess somebody could be like I wouldn't say disappointed, but maybe not like the platforming sections. I don't know, because I thought they were really nice, and you get, as I mentioned, you get a lot of moves that allow you to do like very strange maneuvers and, you know, jump very high and do all kind of dashes in the air and stuff like that, and, you know, grab walls and do jumps, wall jumps back and forth and all sort of stuff like that. So there were a lot of, like, I thought those were cool, but if you're going into the game and not, maybe you want just a regular RPG, you don't realize that there's going to be a lot of like very tight maneuvering in the platforming section, then you may be put off by that, I guess.
Yeah, and the completing the game requires for you to learn those maneuvers that are very, for some they may be very hard to execute. So
Yeah,
it might turn some people off. You can't clear the game just by playing very wisely in the battles and just skipping somehow the platforming sections. You can skip them, in at least the parts that are essential for completing the game.
Yeah, I think at least at the very end of the game, it really tested that you know how to use all the moves. There was like maybe a big put off for me about the game was that there was one bug that we encountered, and it was actually a pretty big bug, because there's as we mentioned, there's a lot of characters in the game, and you need to do certain things to unlock the characters, and some of them just come as you play the story, but some are hidden and so on. Some require you to do like very special tasks, and for one character you need to beat up these 3 special bosses in the game, and you can run into them like way before you're supposed to beat them, because they're like, I don't remember the leveling system, but let's say you're level 10 and they're like level 40 or something. So the fights are like really hard, really tough at that point. But so we run into one of these fights, and somehow the boss just runs away or something like that. I guess it's really not supposed to happen, and the boss didn't respawn, so we couldn't get that one character. So like, I guess it's a fundamental problem with the game, in that when you, as we mentioned, it's a platformer, but when the enemies are like roaming in the world, and when you meet them, you don't just, you know, transfer into a separate world like in old RPGs, but you actually, the combat starts there, right there, then and there, so you can sort of hit the enemies. In some cases you can actually like use your abilities in the platforming section and like hit the enemies so hard that they're defeated before the combat even starts. Or you can just hit them so that they start with a limited amount of health or something like that. But yeah, the combat actually happens there in the same world as the platforming, and so that can sort of bring out bugs and other sort of problems, in that the enemies can sometimes fall out of the screen, and I guess they just teleport back usually. But in the case of this boss or something just happened that made the boss sort of disappear and never come back. So
there wasn't any kind of safety measures in case something like that happens.
Yeah.
There could very well have been some kind of code that checks if the boss is somewhere vanished, or it just resets after 1 hour of gameplay, or something very simple.
Yeah. So, and like the situation felt like so natural that, of course, it didn't feel like a bug at first. It felt like the boss ran away, and that's why I didn't even think about, maybe I shouldn't save the game, maybe I should reload the previous section. And also the placement of the boss was in a place where you couldn't just, run and see that, oh, okay, there's an enemy, let's not go there. It was there was like this hole in the wall, and I just went through it, and the boss fight immediately starts once you do that. So I couldn't even know that there was something there that I shouldn't maybe go through, because I had just learned the move to go through those kind of holes, and it ended up being a bad idea going there, even though most of the other places are similar. They sort of you need to go through a bunch of those kind of like holes in the wall at that part of the game.
Yeah, it probably won't be that big of a deal, and we could clear the game completely, but we really like collecting all the stuff in the game in one sitting. So it was a little bit of a bad times for us.
Yeah, it was a bummer.
Yeah, realizing we couldn't collect all the characters that could have been. And I think that's other fundamental problem, that if you can't, that unlocking some characters requires you to unlock another character. That's, I could see the logic behind there, that a specific character knows another character, and that's how you get to meet them. But when you think about RPGs that have big character rosters, I don't think I can think of any game that requires you to think back to Final Fantasy 3 or 6 in the Japan, or Ultima games, where you could probably find all the characters in any order you want, or happen to across them. So it's a bit of a kind of a stupid thing to put some linearity in you finding those characters. If the game is supposed to be very character driven, especially the story part is very character driven, and that's actually is that next part we could be talking about, because the story part, I remember you made a small review of the game and said that it sounded like it was written by you when you were some 12 years old teenager.
Yeah.
And I felt the same,
So yeah, the story is pretty naive, you could say. But I didn't think it was bad.
It was serviceable.
Yeah.
It gave you the premise, what happened and why are you going for your adventure, and you meet a lot of the characters are the big plus in this game. If they weren't so funny and colorful in character and character design wise, then the game would have been very much more on the average side. But the characters really make the story a lot more bearable. The story itself, it served its purpose and wasn't trying to make itself too serious either.
And I think that's one of the the big things that holds up this game, as opposed to, once again, the Fallen Legion game as well. I thought this as well, I felt like this was written back by me when I was 12. But the difference is that this doesn't really have any comedy in it. So that was the major saving grace of Indivisible. But this just feels like I'm a teenager, I'm a grumpy little teenager, and I don't like my parents, and I don't like the world, and I don't like anything, and everything's horrible. But in this game, I think naive humor it's serviceable when there's humor in it and the characters are funny and so on.
And yeah, we did appreciate some parts where it really could have gone the obvious route. There was the part when the main character meets her passed away relative, and any other generic story would have put the character in very big state of misery. She would be, why did he die? And there would be a little section where she would be out of the battle or something, run away or do something very predictable. But then the writers, they knew this trope, and they just made the character just say, I became a little bit sad, but that's okay, let's move on. So as generic or naive as the story was, it really seemed like the people making the game really knew that it is just pretty naive story, and then just made some very good decisions and didn't go with the tropes that everyone knows and are very fed up with already.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that there's usually like two directions that you should go with some like a story plot points like that. If you want to make something like your magnum opus, you want to make something really good, then in that case, and you know those tropes, you know how to like turn them around or make them like really impactful, then in that case I think like it's good to follow through with them. But in this case it felt like the writers knew that they either didn't have the time or this wasn't supposed to be like that sort of game, so they went with the lighter road, which is that, you know, we need to have something a little bit sad here, but let's not dwell on it. And that was, I think, a good choice in this case.
Yeah.
And about the one thing I'd like to discuss maybe is that should you buy this game? Like, is it worth buying at this point? And the reason I bring this up is because overall I think like we really enjoyed this game, I'd like to say. And it's a good game despite the fact that it was a little bit buggy, and even if we didn't run into that bug, it still does feel a little bit like unfinished, or
a little bit amateurish vibe in it. Or
yeah, it's hard to say what was it, what's it about, but like if you think about like old Flash games or something, like there's this tiny sense of like you hit something and you sort of fly off in a strange way or something. Like it's really hard to like describe, but overall, I mean, it's like you have these 2D characters in a 3D environment. I thought that was done pretty well. I don't think that was what was the thing that was off-putting or anything. It was more like the way you hit certain things and the way you sort of fly from them, or something with hitboxes like not being like all that neat or something like that.
Oh yeah, and one of the very first characters you get has this move where he pulls up rocks, and those rocks are obviously they are sprites, but they are transparent PNGs, and they have this tiny pixel wide line in them that you can see the border of the image asset they used, and that's very strange. In the first one of the first characters you'll get has that, so they didn't see it or what?
I think I looked through some images from Google, and it seems, well, I didn't find any articles, but I would assume that it's like a Switch specific problem or something like that, because I didn't see anybody whining about it. So, and I don't remember seeing it in any of the pictures, but yeah, the character has an ability that he sort of summons rocks floating around him, and the rocks are floating, and there's this one sliver of of edge floating around the rocks. So that was pretty strange. I didn't do any more research on that, but I'm guessing that it's like Switch only
Okay.
problem.
Something happened in the conversion
Yeah.
part, or no?
Yeah, with the porting process, I guess.
But that's just one little thing that adds to the little bit unfinished feel.
Yeah.
They didn't check the game.
Mm.
Even play the first 10 minutes when the character comes up and play the character and see the border.
Yeah.
Because it's so very early that
Mm-hmm.
you'd think that they'd test at least the 10 minutes so that you see that it works at least the game
Yeah.
before you put it on Switch store.
Yeah. And I think by the time we played this, I'd imagine that it was like long enough that if there was a patch being released to it, then they would have already released it. But the other reason I sort of wanted to talk about it was that like obviously, so we think it's a good game. We think it was like worth playing through. There's a new game plus in it, and we didn't think it was like worth playing through a second time. At least not like immediately. Of course, I do want to get back to it at some point. But there's some other like problems with the company that made the game. I don't actually remember what's the
Was it the lab?
yeah, the Lab Zero games. So there was some problem with the like I think as I mentioned, they're the same people who made Skullgirls, but there was some problem with the CEO, and I think pretty much the whole company left except for the CEO or something like that. There was quite a bit of trouble at some point. So I'm guessing like in that sense, I'd say that, you know, if the game is on sale or something like that, I mean, by itself the game is worth playing, yes, but the company at this point, I wouldn't like support it. So I guess that's kind of a downer at this point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was this whole situation where like they had this like a board of directors or something like that, and everybody was agreeing that, you know, the CEO should quit, and so they told the CEO that he should quit, and he said that okay, he'll think about it, and then the next day he comes back and he's like, no, I'm not going to quit. You're going to quit. And he just like disassembled the board of directors and was like, yeah, I'm gonna stay here. It seemed like a real mess.
Yeah, I bet it, or I think it's a small studio, yes.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it has very much the characteristics of a big AAA game studio like EA. So it's,
in that
if
sense,
you want,
yeah.
if you want that in the indie form, then there's that for you.
Yeah.
But this is sarcasm. Of
Yeah.
course, I don't really think you should support someone so bad.
And like in one sense, like I've always thought that you should, you know, separate the like creators from their work of art. So like if some piece of art is really good, then I think it remains a really good piece of art regardless of who made it. But like in this case, it's not the people who made it, it's the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
So the people themselves are like really good, and they're in other companies now. And
Yeah, but to some people it's very important to check the creators also, and if that's a sticking point to you, then there's that info for you now.
Yeah.
You know that the company is in a very bad state even right now, I think.
Yeah, I haven't actually checked for the
Yeah.
situation in about a year, but
But if you can separate your mind from that, then the game is very fun. Has some good strategy elements to the combat.
yeah. And especially if you're looking for more like action oriented, like a turn-based combat style, then it's like and especially like I mean, the game itself is pretty unique. I mean, I don't, from the top of my head, I mean, it was kind of surprising that this Fallen Legion was sort of similar, but aside from that, I don't think I've ever run into like this kind of game that's both like heavy on platforming and heavy on like action-based combo, turn-based combat. So in that sense, it's a very unique experience.
Yeah, and one plus is also if you really like an anime or animated kids shows. Playing this is like you are playing some Avatar: The Last Airbender type of show, and that's it brings some nostalgia memories of watching shows, and now you can play kids show, but it has very much adult themes in it too, so it's not it even has the 7+ rating, so it's not for little kids, but you can put your 10-year-old to play this game and they have a good time with it.
Yeah.
A lot of challenge and pretty art style.
And like, yeah, as you mentioned, like I think Avatar: The Last Airbender is a really good example of how you can sort of take the best of like Japanese anime and transform that into like a Western like comic or animation. And this as well, I mean, I think The Last Airbender was like pretty good in story-wise as well. So as we mentioned, this is a lot more naive, so don't expect the same kind of like story writing. But if you're looking just something with this like amazing combination of Western and Japanese animation style, and you want to experience that, like living in a game or like moving and being able to play it, and then definitely this is a really good experience for that. And especially if you like the graphical style in Skullgirls, I think this is by the same artist, more or less, if I remember correctly. They're usually, I think, utilizing the same artist. It's a unique experience, and I thought it was a really nice game. So it's a bit of a sad thing that things happened with the company that happened. Yeah, that was basically our review of the whole Indivisible game, and
Endings are so hard.
Yeah.
How do you make it stop without it feeling like it stops abruptly
Yeah.
or something?
endings are hard.
We'll see you with our next game in the list. There are
Yeah.
gonna be about a dozen of them, so
Yeah, we
look
played,
forward to next one.
Yeah, we played through a dozen of games, only a dozen of games in the 2021. So I guess we'll be going through them one by one, and some of them will be shorter because, well, they're either we both didn't play them, or like at least in many of these cases, like maybe I played the game and Wendell was just watching, but she was watching the whole time. So we consider that playing them together, I guess.
Yeah.
But in some of the cases, it was just me playing a game all by myself. So there's not all that much to say, I guess.
Yeah,
But,
but we'll see. We'll
yeah.
see how much words one single game can bring up when we start talking.
Yeah,
Get
we'll
some
see.
thoughts up. Yeah, but thanks for watching and listening to our ramble about Indivisible.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.